Hello everyone, welcome to the next video of basic concepts of genetics, where we are discussing about the Mendelian genetics mainly. And we have in the previous video we have discussed about what is meant by genetics, what is meant by gene, what is meant by inheritance, what is meant by hereditary characters, what is meant by recessive character, what is meant by dominant character, what is an allele, what is a trait, and we have discussed about these things and have got some sort of ideas. And in this video we are going to discuss about Mendel's law of inheritance, and or more specifically we can say that in this video we will discuss about law of dominance and law of segregation, which were proposed by Mendel. And as we all know that Mendel was the first one or the first one to give a complete statistical and mathematical analysis of his experiments, and as a result he is well known as the father of genetics, because he was the first one to give a clear cut idea regarding these experiments in genetics, as he followed some characteristics pattern or changes in the cross hybrid experiments which he performed on garden pea plants or the Pisum sativum. So we can say that the studies which he performed have got a proper statistical and mathematical logic, and the studies were done during the mid 19th century, and he performed a experiment for a long time, for almost 7 years. He investigated the characters and gave a conclusion which led to the generation of these laws. At first it was a sort of hypothesis, and later on they were proved to be law by means of experimental proofs. Mendel investigated the characters of garden pea plants that were manifested as two opposing traits. Now, what is meant by opposing traits? Opposing traits means uh, tall or dwarf, okay, wrinkled or smooth, yellow or green seed. These are the opposing traits or the opposing characters. And he conducted artificial pollination and cross pollination experiments using several true breeding pea lines. During the pollination, he observed a number of characteristics and patterns in the development of the offspring or the daughter generation. And he proposed these three laws, that is law of dominance, law of segregation, law of independent assortment. So now we will discuss about the law of dominance and law of segregation. Mendel stated this law by means of monohybrid cross experiments, where he crossed two pure gametes for contrasting characters, like as we said, tall or dwarf, wrinkled or smooth, green or yellow seed. These are the contrasting characters. And what is meant by P generation? That is the parent generation, which is generally indicated by capital P or the uppercase of letter. The resultant offspring were called the first filial or the F1 generation, and later on the F1 generation was allowed to self-pollinate, and they gave rise to F2 generation, that is the second filial generation. Now the observation of the experiment which he performed were: in the first generation, only one character or trait is expressed, which is generally the dominant character. And the second observation was the traits which were absent in F1 generation, that is the first filial generation, those traits reappeared in the second filial generation. So now the observation led to the generation of law of dominance and law of segregation. What is meant by law of dominance? As you all know, the dominant is the one which is little bit stronger in nature. It deprives or marks the weaker one or the recessive one. So law of dominance states that when parent or P with pure contrasting traits are crossed together, only one form of trait appears in the next generation, which is the dominant trait in the phenotype, and the recessive trait remains unexpressed or covered or masked. So what is meant by pure contrasting traits? Pure contrasting traits means it has only got pure tall, that is, which is generally stated by capital T or the uppercase letter, that is capital T, which is a pure trait. There is no other mixing type of things, no other hybrid type of thing. And a pure and it is crossed with a pure dwarf where there is two small t's. There is no other capital T or anything else. Both of them, one of them is dominant and one of them is recessive, and they are pure in nature. There is no sort of hybridization. So now we will discuss the law of dominance by means of an example. On the basis of monohybrid cross which involves only one trait, a cross is done between two pea plants, in which one is pure tall and another one is pure dwarf, that is small t is crossed with a pure tall, that is capital T. Here is a Punnett square which gives the result of the cross between the parent generation, that is a capital T is crossed with a small t, because it is a monohybrid cross experiment, and this led to the first filial generation, which is a tall hybrid. What is meant by hybrid? It has got both a tall allele and a dwarf allele, that is capital T small t, but in this case the capital T is the dominant one, so the tall character is expressed in the F1 generation or the first filial generation. So in conclusion of the first law, we can say the law of dominance is significant, as we can see that the genotypic and the phenotypic ratio shows that the F1 generation has got a tall hybrid. Here the tall one is the dominant one, so the law of dominance is significant and true, but there are some exceptions. There is in many cases it is shown that it is observed that there is insignificance in this dominance, where sometimes there is incomplete dominance, where there is co-dominance, where there is expression of both of the characters, that is tall or dwarf, or any other kind of example, such as there is mixing of two kind of colors in the flower. Those are example of co-dominance. So there are many cases where there is incomplete dominance, and those laws are known as laws of incomplete dominance and codominance, which will be discussed on later videos. So we can conclude that the law of dominance is significant and true, but it is not universally applicable, as there are exceptions, as there are codominance and also incomplete dominance. So we are coming to the second law, that is the law of segregation or the law of purity, which states that the allelic pair in a hybrid segregate or separate during the formation of gametes, and during formation of new gametes it receives only one of the two factors and are pure for a given trait. So now we will explain this law by means of a example. What is the example? As we have seen in the previous example, that there is a cross of a monohybrid, there is a monohybrid cross of pea plant, of a tall pea plant with pure tall pea plant with a pure dwarf pea plant, and there is a generation of hybrid tall, that is capital T small t, in the F1 generation, and later on which generated the law of dominance. Now this F1 generation of hybrid tall is allowed to self-pollinate, and they gave rise to F2 generation or the second phylal generation. Now in the same way as we have performed, here is a Punnett square where the F1 generation is crossed between each other, that is self-pollinated, where there is one capital T, one small t from the male gamete, and one capital T, one small t from the female gamete, and all of them are from the F1 generation or the first phylal generation, and now they were crossed and they led to the generation of capital T, that is a pure tall, as both of the alleles are capital, and there is a small t, capital T, which is a hybrid one. There is another capital T, small t, which is also a hybrid one, and there is a small t, which is a pure dwarf. Now this capital T, small t, they are tall in nature, as the tall allele is dominant in nature. So from this result we can conclude a phenotypic and genotypic ratio. In the phenotype ratio, only the tall and the dwarf one will be considered, as it is visible for everyone that it has got a tall plant, it has got some tall pea plant and has got dwarf pea plant. That is a phenotypic ratio. In the phenotype ratio of tall is to dwarf, the ratio is 3:1, as there are 3 tall pea plant and 1 dwarf pea plant, that is 3:1. This ratio is known as classical Mendelian ratio. And in the genotypic ratio, that is the complete ratio of the complete types, that is pure tall, hybrid tall, pure dwarf, the ratio is 1:2:1, as there is a single pure tall pea plant produced in the F2 generation, 2 hybrid tall pea plant and 1 pure dwarf pea plant. So the ratio is 1:2:1. So now what we can conclude from the second law, or the law of segregation or law of purity, that all sexually producing organisms are diploid, that is 2n in nature, and gametes are haploid, that is N. It is just the half of diploid. It is haploid in nature, as the reappearance of recessive characters in F2 generation showed that in F1 generation factors do not mix with each other, but they remain together, and during gametic formation these factors separate and segregate. As we can see that here there is presence of two characters, that is a capital T small t, where there is one character is dwarf character and another character is tall character. They remains together with each other, but they do not mix. During formation of gamete there is haploid formation, that is T single small capital T single small t. They are becoming haploid, that is N in nature. Before that they are 2n, that is capital T small t, and the characters do not mix with each other, and this is explained in this point, in this conclusion part, that as the reappearance of recessive character in F2 generation showed that in F1 generation factors do not mix with each other but they remain together, and during gametic formation these factors separate and segregate. Now the second conclusion which is drawn from this law, that is, at the time of formation of gamete each member of the pair of genes separates from each other, so that each gamete carries only one factor. That is the law of purity of gamete. They carries only one factor. This capital T carries only the tall character. This small t carries only the dwarf character. This is same in both the cases for male and female gametes. They carry only one character. That is the law of purity of gametes. And the last one is the law of segregation is applicable for all sexually reproducing organism, and there is no other codominancy type or those sort of things. This is universally applicable. Okay, so in the next video we will discuss about the law of independent assortment. Hope this video will help you and give you a clear idea about the laws of dominance and segregation. If you have any kind of doubt or any kind of questions, please comment in the comment box. We will try to answer it out. Thank you.